Hello, good evening. My name is Joe Bandel, and I am the last Rosicrucian. This evening we're going to talk about the connections between literacy and the soul. Now, in one of my last videos, I described, or I mentioned that the soul, conscious awareness, and life itself really depends upon having both some type of physical body along with a non-physical body or an energy body. They create what's called a resonant circuit. Now, it's true that souls can exist without a physical body for quite a bit of time, up to thousands of years, but they will gradually fade and gradually fade back into light unless they find a physical body to strengthen themselves again. So that's kind of what we're talking about. And I mentioned three types of people that seem to be emerging around 5000 BC. What I called the true mystics. And these true mystics are actually original souls that were created along with Gaia, or the earth. They're native souls, native to Gaia. And the appearance of the other two groups, which I called the atheists or the materialists, and what I called the false prophets or perhaps traditionalists, both represent alien souls or foreign souls that have entered into physical life. They have become born into physical bodies. So their souls are in physical bodies, and that's why the characteristics are different. Now the true mystics are the only ones, the original Gaia inhabitants and the original souls, and they're the only ones with the creative, magical ability that both of the other groups are really dependent upon, because they do not have the genetic connection to their soul, the soul and genetic connection that the true native inhabitants have. Characteristics of the materialist or the atheist souls are they can be extremely spiritual, but they see light and dark, and there's no other world for them. And they're because there's no other world, spirituality takes the place of community. They are the hive-minded people that I've talked about. The collective-oriented and society, or the human collective, becomes the spiritual for them, what they live for. Whereas the false prophets or the traditionalists are very warlike, and they have a deep awareness of the non-physical astral realities that they have experienced in the past. Not the future, but in the past. Because for them, the astral is actually showing the tracks of their past to them. So they are traditionalist, because history does tend to repeat itself, and they're always trying to find that pattern that repeats and repeats. Now, as far as literacy and how important a factor that plays. In the Paleolithic age, the cavemen and women, they were able to create art. They were able to create beautiful art. So there was a process inside that was developing a cognitive ability, and that's when they were ripe for the other two groups to come in about that time, because they were at that suggestible stage where they were not, their own sense of self, their own sense of ego was not strong enough to really cut it on their own. So these other two groups came in, and they had a war going on for who was able to take control of these native inhabitants who were just beginning to create their own souls. A soul is a sense of self and a sense of ego in the core that's in the heart. And how literacy comes into play here is, once art becomes hieroglyphics, and once hieroglyphics becomes letters, something happens inside the brain of humans where they begin to visualize inside their heads. They begin to creatively visualize and imagine things and dream. And once they get a sense of self, what's called a watcher self, where they can actually imagine seeing themselves and seeing the world inside their heads, inside their minds, that is when they begin to think of immortality and life after death, or awareness after death. Because this watcher self that's inside, that's created as a function of reading and writing, becomes solidified inside as the ego, as the sense of self. And when you're dreaming, there are original Gaia inhabitants when they dream, they have the ability of having a watcher self, which is part of themselves is watching the movie screen of the dream, where they might see another version of themselves inside. That's called the watcher self. Now, and it is also called the soul, and that was a byproduct of reading and writing and the techniques, the mental evolution that happened for that. Now, the atheists or the materialist group don't have that ability to have a watcher self. What they do have is a very sharp perception of physical reality, and they rely upon logic and reason. You will not see them use spiritual concepts or things, non-physical concepts, because they think that's a bunch of baloney. What they are really after is logic and reason and the collective mind and the collective good of humanity, and that is why their goal is sacrifice yourself to the good, to the common good, because that is what they do. Now, the other group, the traditionalists, the false prophets, warlike, they want to just dominate and they want to enslave. So they're basically trying to create a narrative in which they remain empowered, and the natural original earth inhabitants are not empowered. So they're being kind of sneaky about it. And again, here you have this war for the soul. Now, previous to this time, there wasn't really anything going on, because everything was goddess oriented. Basically, the native Gaia inhabitant, they believed that the goddess brought life through birth, and that she brought death, and then she turned around and brought life again through rebirth. It was a pretty, they didn't even doubt it. But after reading and writing, and after the beginnings of this first sense of self, this first ego, this first sense of awareness of self, became apparent when it developed, all of a sudden it was a game changer. And the two other groups were very patriarchal and anti-feminine, anti-female. That's the other main characteristic here, because the original Gaia inhabitants were balanced and had balanced male and female energy all the way down through the DNA, through the genetics, and they were able to integrate their shadow aspect. None of the other groups can, and that's the difference. And they are the only group that can draw fire down from heaven. They are the only true Prometheus, if you will. So that is why they have really been so chained, Prometheus chained. They didn't dare be given their true freedom until now, when we are taking it. Feel free to see my website. Check in, subscribe. Thank you. Consider donating if you can, or sharing this video. Talk to you later. Bye.